my career in the semiconductor industry, probably shouldn't have happened. I always say that when I started GSA and in 1994, so it's our 30th anniversary, by the way, we started as, thank you, we started as FSA, so the Fabless Semiconductor Association. And so when I started this in 94, and I'll tell you a little bit about how I got started, but certainly no one would have given me the job as CEO. I didn't have the resume to justify leading this organization. I didn't have the experience. But, back to this kind of vision of grandeur, I never let that stop me. And for me, I was in charge of my own destiny. I had created the job I wanted. And I really, from that point on, never allowed anybody to tell me whether I was qualified or not qualified to do something. So, so it was a pretty fun transition. But basically, so after graduate school, I joined Cyrex, which was a startup fabless company, worked with them on their IPO. And the company was so interesting because they were very evangelical about the fabless business model. So not only were they utilizing it, but they believed that it was a longer term way to run your company. Remember that fabless is the decoupling of design from manufacturing. And so this new approach allowed companies to enter the business more easily because they didn't have to think about the billions, maybe it was even millions then, to have their own manufacturing. And then they could focus on what they did well, which was designing innovative products for these emerging markets. And when I had been out on the roadshow during the IPO, every meeting that we would go to with analysts, they would say, okay, when are you guys going to have your own manufacturing? So they never ask if or is it a good idea, but when. So it was expected that this was kind of a business model that you used to bootstrap your company, and then you would move on to having your own manufacturing. But there were dozens of fabless companies at this point in time. And I can tell you that many of them believed that, again, it was more than just a way to bootstrap. So when I left Cyrex and started my own consulting company, I thought, well, okay, I'll bring together these CEOs of these fabless companies that I've met at conferences or on the road show, and we can talk about what the benefits are to fabless and really start making a case for it. And one of the ideas was to have a demand survey. So from the beginning, to try to quantify what the demand was going to be from these fabless companies. So pitched the idea in February to the first group of CEOs. And then from February to September of that year, listened to people, recruited people one by one, got bylaws written, and then we launched in September with 50 companies. And I appointed myself as the leader, and I really had a clear vision of what I wanted to do. And I think these CEOs did as well, of the changes that they wanted to see in the industry. And fast forward to today, we have 85% of all the semiconductor companies are part of GSA. I think that, to step back a little bit also, I think it's important to understand the history, because in 1994, the industry was dominated by companies like Texas Instruments and Intel and Fairchild, companies that had both design and manufacturing. But, we saw this shift happening and wanted to be part of it. But fabless was controversial, and some people even considered it heretical. And I don't know if you've ever heard the quote by Jerry Sanders, that real men have fabs.
That's right.
He actually made that quote the year that we started GSA. Yeah. And so, we were not very popular, but putting together kind of these small disparate companies coming together to have that voice, we helped to quantify the impact, legitimize the model, and to ultimately have played a very important historical role. And, we believed in fabless. I don't think that we ever believed that there would be $100 billion company like NVIDIA utilizing fabless. So it's even beyond all of our expectations. But, it's been an amazing journey, and GSA has changed a lot. We've had to pivot many, many times. We've had to, try to be ahead of where the industry is, like we were on the fabless model, and kind of lead the industry into these new areas. So that's taken a lot of pivots. And, today we represent everybody. We used to represent fabless and kind of their partners, but now we really represent everybody in the supply chain, all the way from materials all the way to the customers. So, companies like Cisco are members, and non-traditional companies that are making chips like Meta and Google and Microsoft are all part of GSA. So it's been an amazing journey, and
it really has. And you had a very clear vision, from very early on, and you sort of made that happen. And I kind of want to talk about that, because that's not easy. Like what you did is really kind of extraordinary, and you were very focused on what you did. And I think it's really interesting when you talk about, I made myself mad, right? I gave myself the job and I went. Can you talk about, again, sort of your thought process in that? Because I think, when I talk to women, a lot of them are hesitant to kind of put themselves forward, or say, I really know what I'm doing here, or, I have maybe 70% of what that job calls for. I don't have 30%, so I'm not going to even interview for it. Can you talk about sort of your thought process there, and maybe the lessons you've learned over the years as you've moved forward on your vision?
Yeah, no, we do hear that, right? And we see it all the time, that that these men step forward when when they clearly don't have the resume to have a job, but they believe in themselves and they believe they kind of deserve the chance.
Right.
And so I don't know, again, maybe it's that I spent a lot of my childhood around men. And so I never really, it never really dawned on me that I couldn't do this. And, especially in the beginning of my career with GSA, I almost looked at being a woman as an advantage, because first of all, there weren't very many. And I had just such a different perspective, and such a different way of working with people than my male counterparts. And, I've been around a lot of brilliant people, and, that I shouldn't even be allowed in the room with. Okay. And I'm not even just, being self-deprecating. People like Morris Chang and Jensen Huang and Lisa Su. These people are, some of the most brilliant people in the world. And I'm around that all the time. And so
Right.
I don't really know. I can't point to where the confidence comes from, but I think that I was, young enough and naive enough when I started this. It actually kind of sounds daunting when I look back on it. Trying to start that today, I think is more daunting than it was then. For me, it was, well, I want to do this, and I think it's a really good idea. Now I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I went, and when I first started pitching this, I went to several VCs that I knew, and people would be like, "Oh no, Jodi, it's a not a good idea, because these companies ultimately really don't have anything in common. They're just doing something to get to the other side. And so there would be nothing for them to work on together." And, again, these people that were telling me this were, 20 years my senior, and they'd been in the industry. They knew things I didn't even dream of that I didn't know. And so it really was gutsy to say, okay, well, I know more than you, and I'm doing this. But I think that, this idea of trying to get people to believe in your idea, I think it's necessary, okay? Because first of all, you get a lot of feedback, and you learn maybe ways to do things that you weren't doing before. So you learn a lot kind of by looking to your elders and gaining that perspective and those inputs. But at the end of the day, you have to trust your gut. Okay, so if I wouldn't have trusted my gut, this wouldn't have existed, okay? Because I was told by enough people that it wasn't a good idea. And in fact, I say that from February to September, I was talking to people and trying to recruit people one-on-one. It was turned down by so many people, and so many people that thought, no, let's go and try to get the SIA, which was at that point in time kind of the leading organization, to accept fabless more. And So people really tried to talk me out of it. So when I actually hired the lawyers and drew up the bylaws, I had no idea if anybody would join. Okay, so it could have been zero. But sometimes you get lucky in life, and I also truly believe that timing is important. I actually literally believe that the exact month, hour, minute that we started GSA was important. Okay, because if it would have been a year before, the companies wouldn't have been big enough to probably even be able to support the organization, and it wasn't really necessarily proven. But by the time that I started, many of the companies had already done IPOs, so they were public companies. So I think that if I would have started a year later, the SIA probably would have begin to accept fabless as a kind of legitimate business model, maybe a year or two. So timing is so important.